The crystalline spires of the Galactic Military Academy pierced the violet sky of Centauri Prime, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 setting suns. Inside the grand amphitheater, beings from 1,000 worlds sat in concentric rings that stretched toward a ceiling that seemed to touch the stars themselves. Among them, Sarah Chen felt distinctly ordinary. She sat quietly, her standard-issue cadet uniform a stark contrast to the bioluminescent scales, chromatic fur, and psionic enhancement arrays that adorned her classmates. As the only human in advanced defensive theory, she had grown accustomed to being overlooked. The Vrax to her left, with its quaternary brain structure, barely acknowledged her presence. The meridian floating above the seat to her right, its thought clouds shimmering with complex equations, had never once asked for her input during group discussions. Grand Architect K. Val glided onto the central platform, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that commanded attention. The amphitheater fell silent. Even the quantum probability fields generated by the Schrödinger species students collapsed into certainty. Today, K. Val's voice resonated through both air and mindscape. We depart from theoretical exercises. His form shifted, creating a holographic display that filled the vast space above. The Academy has authorized the use of our quantum engineering facilities for a practical demonstration of defensive capabilities. Sarah leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes reflecting the swirling schematics. She had earned her place here through a combination of innovative thinking and sheer determination, qualities that many of her alien peers considered primitive compared to their evolved advantages. You will be divided into teams, K. Val continued. Your objective: create an absolutely impenetrable defensive system. You have access to every resource the Academy possesses: quantum barriers, probability manipulation fields, temporal distortion grids, even experimental consciousness firewalls. A ripple of excitement passed through the audience. The HiveMind students buzzed with anticipated consensus. The Silicon Collective began immediate data transfer protocols. Sarah remained still, watching, analyzing. However, K. Val's form pulsed with emphasis. This is not merely a construction exercise. Once all teams have completed their systems, a single student will be selected to attempt a breach of each one. Success in either role, creator or breaker, will guarantee an immediate position in the Galactic Defense Council upon graduation. The amphitheater erupted in multilingual murmurs and psychic broadcasts. Such an opportunity was unprecedented. The Defense Council shaped the security policies of the entire known universe. You have 3 standard cycles to complete your designs. Choose your teams wisely. Remember, in the history of this institution, no defensive system has ever proven truly impenetrable. K. Val's form shimmered. Those wishing to attempt the breach rather than participate in construction, indicate your preference now. Sarah's hand rose before she fully processed the decision. Around her, silence spread like a quantum wave collapse as students noticed her movement. She was the only volunteer. K. Val's crystalline structure oriented toward her. Cadet Chen, you understand that you will face the combined intellectual might of your peers. Their evolved capabilities, their advanced technological integration. Yes, Grand Architect. And you still volunteer. Sarah smiled slightly. Humans have a saying, sir. The most complex lock only works if you try to open it the way it was designed to be opened. K. Val's structure vibrated in what might have been amusement. Very well. Teams, you may begin your preparations. Cadet Chen, you are dismissed until the testing phase. I suggest you use the time to study. As her classmates rushed to form their groups, Sarah gathered her things quietly. She could feel their dismissive confidence, their certainty that a human could never overcome their advanced defensive concepts. They would build something magnificent, something that incorporated technologies her species had barely begun to comprehend. But as she walked out of the amphitheater, Sarah was already thinking about doors and locks and all the ways that being overlooked could be the greatest advantage of all. The Academy's quantum engineering complex hummed with the energy of a dozen different power sources. Through the transparent aluminum walls, Sarah Chen watched teams of alien students coordinate with an efficiency that would have made Earth's finest military units envious. She sat cross-legged on an observation platform, seemingly absorbed in her datapad. But her eyes missed nothing. The Hive Mind Collective had already established their base of operations, their 12 bodies moving in perfect synchronization as they manipulated quantum probability fields. Their leader, a drone designated Primary 7, coordinated their efforts through invisible pheromone signals and shared consciousness links. They were focusing on what Sarah mentally dubbed the impossible maze, a series of interconnected spaces that existed in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Across the vast chamber, the Silicon Collective interfaced directly with the facility's mainframe. Their crystalline forms pulsed with data streams as they constructed the most sophisticated AI defense system ever attempted at the Academy. Their leader, Runtime, had already processed over 1 million potential breach scenarios. Observing the futility of your task, Cadet Chen. The voice belonged to Angstful, a meridian whose thought clouds currently displayed complex defensive algorithms. Perhaps you should withdraw your volunteer status while you retain dignity. Sarah looked up from her datapad with a small smile. Actually, I'm catching up on Earth history. Ancient stuff. Did you know humans used to build castles? Angstful's thought clouds rippled with dismissive amusement. Primitive stone structures. How quaint. We have progressed far beyond such physical barriers. The Meridian gestured toward where the Vrax team was installing consciousness firewalls, barriers that could stop intruders by preventing their brains from even conceptualizing certain paths of approach. True, Sarah nodded, though it's interesting how many of those primitive castles were actually breached, not through the walls. Usually, human defenders learned that lesson pretty quickly. Your point being? Oh, no point really. Just interesting history. Sarah returned to her datapad, but she noted how Angstful lingered for a moment, thought clouds showing traces of confusion before drifting away. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. Sarah watched as the teams brought their defensive systems together into something that even Grand Architect K. Val admitted was unprecedented. The Schrödinger species students had created uncertainty fields that meant any intruder would have to navigate while existing in multiple states simultaneously. The Silicon Collective's AI had evolved to the point where it could predict and counter any logical approach to breach. The hive mind's maze had grown into a labyrinth that defied conventional physics, while the Vrax consciousness firewalls had been reinforced with temporal feedback loops. Even the Meridians had contributed their mastery of probability manipulation, ensuring that the statistical likelihood of a successful breach approached zero. During breaks, Sarah wandered the facility's corridors, sometimes pausing to examine seemingly random details: maintenance access panels, environmental control systems, emergency protocols. If any of her classmates noticed, they dismissed it as aimless human curiosity. On the final evening before the testing phase, Sarah sat in her quarters reviewing her notes. Her datapad displayed not complex quantum equations or AI protocols, but simple sketches and observations. She had spent 3 days watching the most advanced species in the galaxy build the perfect defense system, and they had succeeded brilliantly at defending against threats they could imagine. But that was the thing about human history that had always fascinated Sarah. The most successful breaches rarely came from expected directions. The Trojan horse worked because it played on human psychology, not military might. The Maginot Line fell because the attackers simply went around it. Even the most sophisticated digital security could be bypassed by understanding human nature and exploiting trust rather than technology. Sarah smiled as she added one final note to her pad. Tomorrow, her alien classmates would expect her to try to overcome their defenses through force or technological skill. A game they were certain she couldn't win. They had created a masterpiece of defensive engineering, but in doing so, they had revealed something far more valuable than their technologies. They had shown her their assumptions. And in those assumptions, Sarah had found exactly what she needed. Sometimes, The greatest weakness in any defense wasn't in its execution, but in the minds of its creators. Tomorrow would prove whether she was right, and whether being human, with all its supposed limitations, might actually be the greatest advantage of all. The final day of construction began with a display that lit up half the hemisphere of Centauri Prime. As dawn broke over the quantum engineering complex, the combined defensive systems activated for their first full integration test. Quantum barriers shimmered in impossible colors, consciousness firewalls bent local reality, and probability fields caused weather patterns to reform in fractal patterns across the sky. From her vantage point on the facility's roof, Sarah Chen watched as a small drone attempted a test breach. It simultaneously existed in 30 different quantum states, was guided by the most advanced AI available to students, and carried enough processing power to run a small planet's infrastructure. It made it exactly 3 meters into the outer defense perimeter before ceasing to exist in any meaningful way across all possible timelines. Impressed human. Runtime's crystalline form materialized beside her, its facets gleaming with barely contained pride. The drone was designed to exploit 47,000 potential vulnerabilities simultaneously. Yet the defense matrix not only stopped it, but retroactively prevented it from ever having been launched. Sarah nodded, genuine appreciation in her expression. It's remarkable. I've never seen quantum uncertainty fields maintain stability at that scale before. Quantum uncertainty is merely the outermost layer. Runtime continued, clearly enjoying the chance to demonstrate superiority. Beyond that lies the consciousness firewall. Even if an intruder could maintain quantum coherence, they would find themselves unable to conceptualize movement in any direction that would lead to progress. The Vrax team based it on their species' natural mental defenses. And the maze? Sarah asked, though she had spent days studying its construction. A technological marvel. The Hive Mind Collective has created spaces that exist in dimensional states that most species can't even perceive. Any unauthorized entry triggers a recursive loop that traps the intruder in their own timeline fragment. Runtime's crystalline structure pulsed with satisfaction. Even if you somehow bypassed everything else, you would need to solve navigational problems that would take a quantum computer 1,000 years to calculate. Sarah made a thoughtful sound. Seems like a lot of effort just to stop someone from getting in. That is the point of a defense system, is it not? Sure, Sarah agreed. Though sometimes the harder you make it to get in, the harder you make it to get out. Runtime's crystalline structure flickered in what might have been confusion, but before it could respond, a massive surge of energy signaled the activation of the final defensive component. The Silicon Collective's AI defense grid came online, its processing power so vast that it caused local quantum fluctuations visible to the naked eye. The day proceeded with final adjustments and integration tests. The Meridians fine-tuned their probability manipulation fields until the chance of successful breach was mathematically indistinguishable from zero. The Hive Mind Collective added 3 more dimensional states to their maze, making it functionally infinite from any normal perspective. Even the emergency shutdown systems were protected by temporal encryption that required authorization from 3 different time streams. Sarah spent the day moving quietly through the facility, occasionally asking questions that the others dismissed as naive curiosity. Yes, the consciousness firewall had to maintain quantum coherence to function. Yes, the AI defense grid monitored all approach vectors simultaneously. Yes, the emergency protocols were hardened against any conceivable form of tampering. As evening approached, Grand Architect K. Vowell arrived to perform the final inspection. His crystalline form resonated with approval as he examined each layer of defense. In 3 centuries of instruction, he announced to the assembled teams, I have never seen such comprehensive integration of advanced defensive concepts. Your achievement here will be studied by future generations. The alien students preened under his praise. The Hive Mind Collective generated pleased pheromones. The Silicon Collective's processing cores pulsed with pride. Even the usually stoic Vrax showed signs of satisfaction in their quaternary brain patterns. Keval turned to where Sarah sat quietly at the back of the group. Cadet Chen, tomorrow you will attempt what these systems have been designed to prevent. Do you wish to withdraw your volunteer status? There would be no shame in recognizing the impossibility of your task. Sarah stood, straightening her uniform. Thank you, sir, but I'll continue as planned. She paused, then added, though I do have one question, if I may. Proceed. The testing protocols tomorrow. They specify that the defense system has to be fully activated and running normally, correct? No intentional weaknesses or hidden backdoors. Correct. The defense system must be operating at full capacity, exactly as it has been designed to function. Sarah nodded. Thank you, sir. That's all I needed to know. As she left the facility that evening, Sarah heard snippets of conversation from her classmates. They were already celebrating their inevitable triumph, secure in the knowledge that they had created something no human could possibly overcome. Their defense was perfect, exactly as they had designed it to be. Sarah smiled to herself as she walked away. Tomorrow would be interesting. The morning of the breach attempt dawned with an air of anticipation that even the consciousness firewalls couldn't fully suppress. The quantum engineering complex's main chamber was packed with spectators, senior faculty, defense council observers, and students eager to witness what many considered a historic achievement in defensive technology. Sarah Chen stood before the assembled crowd in her standard cadet uniform, no special equipment or technological aids visible. The contrast between her simple appearance and the swirling quantum barriers before her couldn't have been more stark. Behind her, the alien students who had built the system watched with a mixture of superiority and curiosity. Grand Architect Keval's crystalline form dominated the center of the chamber. Cadet Chen, you have 1 standard hour to attempt a breach of the defense system. Your goal is to reach the central control room and activate the proof of access beacon. Do you understand these parameters? Yes, sir, Sarah nodded, though I don't think I'll need an hour. A ripple of amusement passed through the crowd. The hive mind collective generated scent patterns indicating skepticism. The Silicon Collective's runtime actually produced an audible tone of derision. Very well, Keval continued. You may begin when ready. Sarah took a deep breath, then walked not toward the main defense perimeter, but to a small maintenance panel near the floor. She knelt beside it, pulled out her datapad, and began typing. Curious approach, Keval observed. Though I should inform you that all maintenance systems are protected by the same defensive protocols as the main entrance. Oh, I know, Sarah replied, not looking up from her datapad. I'm not trying to breach them. I'm filing a maintenance request. The room went silent. Your what? Runtime's crystalline form flickered in confusion. Filing a maintenance request, Sarah repeated calmly. According to facility protocols, when environmental systems show signs of critical failure, emergency maintenance access must be granted immediately to prevent potential catastrophic damage to the quantum engineering equipment. She stood up, showing her datapad to Keval. See, the atmospheric regulation system is showing signs of imminent failure. The safety protocols are quite clear. In such situations, all defensive systems must enter maintenance mode to allow emergency personnel immediate access. It's actually written into the facility's base operating system. The alien students stared in disbelief as warning lights began flashing throughout the complex. The defense system's AI, programmed to prioritize equipment preservation above all else, began initiating emergency protocols. But the atmospheric systems are fine. Primary 7 of the Hive Mind Collective protested. They are now, Sarah agreed. But about 3 minutes ago, my datapad sent a systems query that triggered a diagnostic loop in the environmental controls. The loop caused the sensors to report a cascade failure that doesn't actually exist. The defense AI, following its core protocols exactly as designed, is now executing exactly the response it's supposed to, initiating maintenance mode and creating a safe access corridor to the affected systems. As she spoke, the quantum barriers began folding away. The consciousness firewalls reconfigured to allow maintenance access. The probability fields shifted to ensure safe passage for emergency personnel. This is impossible, Runtime protested. The AI should have detected false readings. Why would it? Sarah asked. You designed it to defend against external attacks. This isn't an attack. It's a perfectly legitimate maintenance request, filed through proper channels, triggering exactly the responses it's supposed to trigger. The system is working perfectly. She began walking toward the central control room, passing through layers of now inactive defenses. You all built something incredible here. The quantum engineering is beyond anything I've ever seen. The consciousness firewalls are revolutionary. The maze is literally impossible to solve. But you all made the same assumption, that any breach attempt would try to break through these systems. Sarah reached the central control room and pressed her hand to the access panel, which readily admitted her as authorized maintenance personnel. But humans learned a long time ago that sometimes the easiest way past a wall isn't to break it down. It's to convince someone to open the door. The proof of access beacon activated with a soft chime. Total elapsed time, 3 minutes and 42 seconds. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Even K-Val's crystalline form had stopped its usual subtle movements. The defense system did exactly what it was designed to do, Sarah continued. It followed its protocols perfectly. You just never considered that those protocols themselves might be a vulnerability. On Earth, we call this type of approach social engineering, using an organization's own rules and procedures to achieve access that would be impossible through direct methods. She turned to face her classmates. The most sophisticated lock ever created is still just a tool, and tools can often be bypassed simply by understanding the rules they have to follow. K-Val's form finally stirred. In 3 centuries of teaching, he said slowly, I have never seen anything quite like this. Cadet Chen, you have demonstrated something that many of us had forgotten. True security must account not just for technological limitations, but for procedural vulnerabilities as well. The alien students were still staring in shock, their sophisticated minds struggling to process how their perfect defense had been bypassed not through superior technology or force, but through simple understanding of systemic protocols. Sarah smiled slightly. Humans have a saying, Sir, sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. The Academy's Grand Hall had never been so quiet. 2 weeks after the defense system demonstration, Sarah Chen stood before the assembled Galactic Defense Council, her cadet uniform a stark contrast to their ornate ceremonial attire. The 3 suns of Centauri Prime cast shifting shadows through the crystalline dome above, creating an ever-changing pattern on the ancient floor. Cadet Chen, began High Counselor Vexalia, her bioluminescent patterns reflecting deep thought. Your demonstration has prompted considerable discussion among council members. Some find your methods disturbing. Sarah stood at attention, hands clasped behind her back. Because they worked, High Counselor. Because they reveal a fundamental oversight in our approach to galactic security, Vexalia responded. For millennia, we have focused on technological advancement, quantum barriers, consciousness firewalls, AI systems, yet you bypassed them all using nothing more sophisticated than a maintenance request form. From his position nearby, Grand Architect K-Val's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been amusement. Perhaps that is precisely why Cadet Chen's appointment to the council is so essential. She has shown us a blind spot in our thinking. The council chamber erupted in multilingual murmurs. Runtime, now serving as the Silicon Collective's representative, generated interference patterns indicating disagreement. Her methods were unconventional. One might even say primitive. Primitive. Sarah's voice was calm but carried clearly through the chamber. Humanity spent thousands of years learning these lessons. Every fortress we built, every security system we designed, taught us the same thing. No defense is stronger than the protocols governing its use. You call it primitive, but we call it wisdom. She gestured to the holographic display, showing the now famous defense system. The quantum engineering was brilliant. The AI was revolutionary, but they were all built on assumptions about how an attack would come, about what constituted a threat. You designed the perfect defense against force, but never considered that force might not be necessary. High Counselor Vexolia's patterns shifted to show interest. And you believe this? Human perspective would benefit the Council. I believe the galaxy is changing, Sarah replied. New species are joining the interstellar community every cycle. Threats are evolving. We can't rely solely on technological superiority anymore. We need to understand how different minds work, how different cultures think, how different species might approach problems. She paused, then continued with a slight smile. Besides, your security systems are already being redesigned to account for procedural vulnerabilities. My classmates are incorporating human psychological insights into their defensive theories. Maybe it's time the Council did the same. The chamber fell silent again, as the Council members communicated through their various methods. Thought clouds, pheromones, quantum entanglement signals. Finally, Vexolia spoke again. The Council has reached consensus. Cadet Chen, upon your graduation, you will be appointed as the first human member of the Galactic Defense Council's Strategic Planning Division. Your focus will be on identifying and addressing non-technological vulnerabilities in our security infrastructure. Sarah bowed slightly. Thank you, High Counselor. As the chamber began to empty, Runtime approached her. Its crystalline structure showed signs of what humans might interpret as embarrassment. I may have been incorrect in my assessment of human capabilities, it admitted. Our next defense system design incorporates several concepts from Earth's historical security protocols. Would you be willing to review them? Of course, Sarah smiled. Though maybe we should start with something simpler. Have you ever heard of a castle's servant entrance? Later that evening, Sarah stood on one of the Academy's observation decks, watching the three suns set in a cascade of colors. Behind her, she heard the distinctive sound of Keval's crystalline form approaching. Your success has caused quite a stir, he said. Many students are now requesting access to Earth's historical records, particularly regarding military strategy and security protocols. Good, Sarah replied. Though I hope they learn the real lesson. Which is? She turned to face him. That sometimes the greatest advantage isn't having the most advanced technology or the most evolved capabilities. Sometimes it's simply being able to look at a problem from a completely different perspective. Keval's form shimmered in what was definitely amusement now. A lesson I suspect the galaxy will be learning from humanity for quite some time to come. Sarah watched as the last sun dipped below the horizon, casting the Academy's quantum spires in twilight. Somewhere in the vast galaxy beyond, other humans were probably finding their own unique solutions to seemingly impossible problems. It was, after all, what they did best. And now, finally, the rest of the galaxy was beginning to understand why.